causative factors that created abuse and harm in the church decades ago are still alive and well in the church in New Zealand today. They have a modern expression, they look different, but they are still exactly the same as what they were.
This is Down to Earth Conversations, where we hear from ordinary people who are helping to bring a bit of heaven down to earth. Kia ora, welcome to another episode of Down to Earth Conversations with me, your host, Andy Dixon. Today my guest is Charlotte Cummings, who has actually appeared on the podcast before, but that time she was the one asking the questions, not answering them. In this episode, I turn the tables and we dive into Charlotte's life and work. We hear about some of the ways she's learnt to outwork an inner desire to help others, especially people who are finding life tough through mental health challenges, parenting, or because they've been hurt in faith-based spaces. We talk about her work as an investigator, counsellor, consultant, and more. We hear about her experience of supporting those who have been hurt in Christian faith communities, and we get her take on the recently released report from the Royal Commission of Enquiry into abuse in state and faith-based care. We also talk about her own podcast, Feel Better, and how she is offering her wealth of therapeutic knowledge to any who will listen. She is a top-class human. This is episode 98 of Down to Earth Conversations. Here's Charlotte Cummings. Charlotte, it's great to have you here. Well, I'd say that. I'm in your house. It's great to be here. Great to have you back on the podcast. You interviewed me back on episode 42, but nice to be reversing the roles this time and be able to record it all with you about your stuff. So, kia ora, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm a long-time fan, so it's nice to be calling in for today.
and for those who don't know you, do you want to tell us a little bit about who is Charlotte Cummings?
Yeah, well, there are a few different versions of that answer. And often when my husband's asked, what does Charlotte do? He's like, well, you're just going to have to go and ask her because it's like, it's too complicated. There are too many things. There are a bunch of things. And one of the realities that I've learned about myself is I can have kind of central passions and then do a variation of different things so long as they relate back to those kind of core kaupapa and purposes that I feel I have in the world. So it's a mixture of things. I'm licensed as a private investigator. I do a bit of work with that hat on. I work as a counsellor doing one-to-one private practice work, as a consultant in various different spaces, particularly around the response to harm where that has occurred in faith-based settings, some funding advisory work, all sorts of things, a PhD in the mix at the moment, and I'm a mum to 3 little kids. Often people say, oh, how do you do all those things and then like juggle kids in the midst of all of that, and especially with carrying heavy stuff in my working life. And I just think, I don't know how I'd do it without my kids, because I actually need to be, you know, having Nerf wars and jumping on the trampoline and, you know, going swimming and doing all those really immersive things, because children are so engaging and distracting in the best way. So, it all works together somehow.
And one of the things I've observed about you as well is that you also have a good whānau support network.
Yeah.
You know, so it's not just you and Jono trying to do this on your own.
Yeah.
Which is pretty important as well.
Yeah, I'm no superwoman. I'm the first person to say we have all the grandparents living in the same town that we live in.
Yeah, nice.
And this is amazing.
How does one become a private investigator?
Oh, yeah, it was a little bit of an accident, that one. But, so, you know, I did realise through my work with people who had very difficult things happen in their life that most private investigators were older white men who had a policing background, and they have a way about them that is a bit different to the way I have about me. And people, when they'd experienced something really difficult, were having to go and talk to people who, you know, didn't necessarily have that therapeutic or trauma-informed background. And I just wanted to show up for people in times of difficulty as a really understanding person to
Yeah.
try and make, I can't change what historically has happened for people, but I can help form really good processes and response to what they're bringing forward. So that's part of that work. People think it is, long range cameras across the street, staking out cheating husbands in the bushes, wearing black trench coats. I do have one, but not worn for that purpose. And it's not that. It's actually, a lot of writing reports and talking to people and sorting difficult things out.
Yeah, right. Which, as you say, you've done a lot of different things that all kind of connect around some central things. I tried to write a bit of a list of some of the things, and I won't have got them all, but operations management, supporting charities with planning, policy, training, and that sort of thing, communications management, the supporting victims of abuse by the church, being a celebrant, an investigator, a counsellor, a researcher. There's, and then not the least of your roles is being a wife and a mum.
Yeah.
When you look across all of those, what is it that really ties them together for you?
Big and great question. I think that I see in the person of Jesus a siding with people who have been marginalised, who've been hurt, who are misunderstood, who are oppressed in some way, and I want to follow that example in some way. And for me, that means seeking out people who have experienced something difficult and trying to be there for them in some way, whether that is through running a big mental health service or through one-to-one conversation or processes that try and reduce the likelihood of harm. It doesn't really matter how I use my personality and my skills and my sort of areas of interest within that. But I think there is, for me, something really fundamental about living as a Christian in the world and trying to show up for people who are on the edges. Yeah.
My observation of it too would be that a lot of what you do informs other parts of what you do.
Yeah.
That you're a counsellor and your training in counselling will be helpful for supporting victims of abuse, and your experience with survivors of abuse will inform your counselling and your practice and and even the way you parent. And I think so often it's really easy to segregate things into, this is my work life, this is my home life, this is my church life, whereas yours feels like it's very integrated.
Yeah, well, it's cohesive for me, and I've just accepted that it doesn't matter if it doesn't make sense to anyone else. It makes sense in how I'm living this out. Even things like the celebrant work, which, for me was about, I saw so many people who had backgrounds that included faith of some description, and then that wasn't part of their kind of young adult and early adult life. And then they found themselves getting married, and in this moment that was meant to be quite spiritual and significant and rich and meaningful, and they were like, but I'm not going to go and see the local priest to get married, and we're not connected to a church, so we can't have a minister, but I still want someone who gets this and can do something beautiful and meaningful for us in this moment when we're getting married. So, and people who've sometimes been, they've not been able to fit in church environments, and that's why they're on the outside. So it sort of doesn't really matter what the point of connection is, but for me, I want to show up for people who, for whatever reason, are on the outside, or there's something going on for them.
Has that always been a thing for you? Like as a kid, were you like that?
Yes. And somebody that we both know, he and I at primary school started something called the Helping Gang And it was the cutest thing ever. So, pretty much I think when we were like age 6 and we were like, well, we've got this down, we've been here for a year. We know how all this works. And we started to see the need around us in our local primary school in a little town in New Zealand. And, we were aware that that little girl with a disability actually couldn't open her lunch without some help. And these people didn't have anything meaningful to do and they were struggling with friendships. And so we set up this thing called the Helping Gang, and we would do whatever needed to be done to help people around the school.
That's so cool.
It just so happens that we both have a really significant Christian faith now. That was definitely part of our upbringing, but we have our own very personal faith stories and ministries now, really. And it was so cool that was, very clearly a part of how I was inclined, right from a very young age.
Yeah. I love that story, that the Helping Gang. I think we should have helping gangs at every school.
Well, it was before the days of organised peer support programs and buddies and monitors. This was like the late 80s and early 90s. That was not really a thing. And yeah, but we loved it. It was great.
That's cool that it's been something that has resonated with you from a kid, and you still find yourself functioning out of that space. I think when I've talked to a lot of people for this podcast, it's amazing how many of them, what they're doing now is a direct reflection of who they were as they grew.
Yeah.
And I think it's really easy to miss that.
Yeah.
And to go, oh, well, actually, this is just an extension of me exploring who I am, finding how I fit in the world, which is what we're all doing as kids and teenagers and on. Totally. I mean, I'm still doing that. I'm 44, nearly 44, and still, going, where do I fit in the world?
Yeah.
What do I bring? And going, I love that that's a journey that, for you, connects right back. Yeah. And you can see that flowing through. Obviously, as you've gone on in that journey, there's a million ways you can be the helping gang in the world.
Yeah.
There's a million opportunities to help people, and you've kind of narrowed, even though you've done it in lots of different ways, you've kind of got a couple of focuses that have been strong for you.
Yeah.
One of those, which you mentioned to me before we recorded, was you're really passionate about women's mental health.
Yeah.
At what stage did that become something that kind of leapt out to you as I'm really passionate about this?
When I went mental. Some of that particularly, I've had moments of struggle and challenge, dating back into my adolescent years. So an inclination towards finding things difficult, in terms of mood, and had my own sort of experiences of that within my high school years, particularly probably related to other things that were going on. And then I found myself, like for many people through your early young adult years, there's relationship breakups that feel particularly disastrous. Yeah. And you now look back and think, wow, what a lucky break. But then I hit the mental health challenges of being a mum. And, parenting is like a sensory overload, and suddenly you have to emotionally regulate yourself and this other human, and then another one, and then another one, in our case. And you lose your kind of sense of identity and purpose, and your time is not your own, and your connections aren't what they were. Everything has changed. And I describe parenting when I'm working with people in a counselling sense. I say to them, parenting is actually a trauma. Like, you've experienced a trauma here in becoming a parent. You're never going to go back. A little bit like when there's some kind of traumatic event in people's lives. Life is never the same after this thing happens. And I describe that to people around parenting, and they usually are a blubbering mess at hearing that recognition that actually it is really, really profoundly difficult, this task of raising other small human beings. And for me, I found being a mum just so totally overwhelming, and mum guilt, and am I doing this right, and but I want to have some kind of work as part of my life, and how is this all going to go, and an unwell child who didn't sleep, and a child with his own journey around neurodiversity and all sorts of stuff going on, just was a real challenge for my own mental health. And I just really feel like the isolation that women particularly experience through motherhood, we need to have some better answers to that. And particularly, I feel very passionate about the challenges of access, because for mums, how can they get to one-to-one therapy unless they've got supports? Funding that is usually a problem while they're on one income or one and a bit incomes in their household. They often have 1,000 other things that they feel should be a priority to put family household money into. And, there's just this whopping kind of barrier to accessing one-to-one therapy. So for me, in that space, my heart really is to try and get women thinking about their mental health, try and bring acknowledgement to the struggles of mental health and parenting in early years particularly, and to just try and give women tips, advice, perspective, insights, anything that I can that makes them feel seen and hopefully makes it a bit easier.
I think all that's really important about acknowledging those barriers.
Yeah.
But also that idea that this isn't just another normal life event.
Yeah.
I mean, it is and it isn't.
Yeah.
It's a very natural part of life.
Yeah.
But it changes everything.
Totally.
I mean, I personally had postnatal depression 3 times.
Yeah.
We've got 3 kids.
Yeah.
It happened 3 times.
Yeah.
Diminished amounts of time each time as I understood what was going on. But the first time was 3 months, and I just thought I was crazy and the most useless dad that ever walked the earth. How could I not be coping with it? Everyone else copes with this.
Yeah.
And I think there's this almost blanket silence over how hard it can be.
Yeah.
And you just see people like if you're a church person, you see them come to church and smiling and isn't our new baby lovely, and you don't hear the hard parts of that they barely even got there.
Totally.
And
what was said in the car on the way there, or
all of that.
all of those
things. And you're right. Like there's a lot of traumatic response for some people.
Yeah.
I mean, when I had it analysed during counselling and stuff, I figured out that actually the things that are I need these to be well were things that all got taken away by having children.
Not particularly conducive to being a parent. Yeah.
No. So, I mean, things like having time to myself, getting enough sleep, being able to, spend time doing things that I love doing outside of the family, those things just suddenly took a hit.
Yeah.
And I was a zombie.
Yeah.
They
take a hit for a really long time too. Yeah. It's not just like a short-term survivable thing, especially if you're having more than one child.
So I try not to be a downer, but I also try to talk to people who are pregnant for the first time and say, awesome, this is so exciting.
Yeah.
This is also going to be quite hard.
Yes.
I don't want it to be the first thing they hear.
Yeah.
But this is going to be hard.
Yeah.
And so feel free to talk about it.
Yeah.
Because it is,
Yeah.
And I love that that's a focus for you of going, how can I, through my experiences, through my training, provide support for other people so that they can do this thing?
Yeah.
So that they can live a flourishing life.
Yeah. We've done so much better as a society around acknowledging that there are challenges that people have with their mental health. We have gotten to a point where we say to people like, you should get help if you're struggling. We don't teach people how to ask for help. Before they ask for help, they have to actually be able to identify that they're struggling and that they're worthy and deserving of help. And there are so many things that I think we're still not getting right in that space. And it is a relatively gendered problem in that particularly there is a disadvantage that women bear around their experience of well-being through the years of having children. So we just can't do this thing where we go see a therapist, like, go find this person, even like someone who has capacity to see you, go find them and go and pay lots of money to sit in their little office, and actually probably you kind of need to see them a couple of once every couple of weeks, and that's our solution. Like, that's just not working.
Yeah, and like, even as I share, about my story, I know that, like you say, women are disproportionately affected by this.
Yeah.
And even little things. I know when we had our first kid, and there were some issues around feeding, and Bex was made to feel just so stink about it, because all of the messages beforehand were, this is a really natural thing. Yeah. It's really easy. It's,
everyone can do this.
Yeah.
Every baby can do this.
And actually, that's just not true.
Yeah.
Like, it really just isn't.
Yeah.
And yet there was no, I guess, message that came across going, hey, this is a really good thing to do, but sometimes it doesn't work out.
Yeah.
And these are some other options.
Yeah.
And so then you feel like a horrible person, and what am I doing wrong? And, there's all that pressure that women particularly get lumped with. And I saw a thing the other day that said having, it was particularly to do with pregnancy, but it was like having a kid is like the ultimate group project where one person does 99% of the work and everyone gets an A.
Totally.
And I was like, I can see that, and even just the emotional changes in women's bodies through pregnancy. Yeah. Like, people don't talk about it that much.
Absolutely.
And it's huge.
What's happening hormonally and, in their own kind of biochemistry that's influencing how they feel. It is a really profound hit to people's mental health to become a parent.
So what are the sorts of ways that you try and support women in this kind of area?
I think one of the really key things is being honest. And people are still, like, sometimes I get messages where people say, it's kind of so confusing to me that you're talking about your own struggles, because, like, aren't you meant to, as a therapist, make it look like you've got it all together? And I'm so allergic to that. I'm so done with that way.
Aren't you the expert?
No, well, yes, but, like, I'm sorry. When it comes to, my health and fitness, I want to turn up to be helped by someone who knows the struggle, not someone who's always been naturally slim and fit all of their life. I'm like, I don't want to be trained by you. You don't know what I'm going through. Yeah. So I think, there's, for me, just this this real power that comes in helping people see that their own experience is normal. And, one of the things I do in relationship couples therapy is sometimes we end up sort of talking about a concept or a passion that has some kind of terms and words around it, and I'm like, do you know what, like, I can theoretically tell you about this, or how do you feel about me just spending a minute telling you how this concept plays out in my own marriage? And they're like, what the heck? Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, well, told with permission, like, we've decided as a couple we're okay with talking about this. Because it really, really helps people. I'm like, well, this pattern, and I do this, and then he does this, and then this creates this. And they're like, will you tell me that? I'm like, well, yeah, but because I'm expecting you to tell me the deepest, darkest thoughts in your mind. And we're in this, like, really, close, trusting dynamic where you're telling me all sorts of things about yourself. Like, I can throw you a bone and tell you, like, this is how this thing plays out in my marriage. And not in a way that it becomes about me. Very kind of short and to the point and constructive and for their therapeutic benefit. But people are just like wowed by that. It's so cool. I love doing it.
That's cool. And it's not like you're trying to win the conversation. No. It's not like, well, you've had this issue. Well, let me tell you.
But I'm like, oh, well, I can tell you a hypothetical textbook version of this. Or I can say, like, okay, well, in this situation, this. I love it.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
One of the other things that you said you're really passionate about, and we've mentioned it a couple of times already, is supporting people who have been hurt by the church, and also helping churches to not hurt people.
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah. How was it that you came into that kind of work?
Yeah, really accidentally when I look back. But church hurt has touched my own family life. And there have been elements of my own experience in that. You know, most good stories start with that.
Yeah.
And then I found myself, I think an early role was being appointed to receive new complaints that were coming forward, where people were at a stage where they wanted to share their own personal story and experience, and someone had to meet with them. And I was that person within a particular denomination. And that then turned into, well, actually, like, I've got some thoughts about how this process goes. So can I help rewrite that policy? And actually, you know, I think that we really need lots of information that we can give people about what to expect in this process before they even come forward. So can I write that up? And, you know, turned into more than the role that I originally took on, and then became, okay, well, there are actually a number of complaints coming from this place. Can you go in and do a review around this community and what's happening here? And so everything kind of snowballed in terms of what those roles and functions looked like. Then it became, okay, well, we're aware that you're doing that within the denomination that you're part of, and now another church wants someone independently to come in and look at this in their context, and it could be all of my work. It is, there is an abundance of need in this space. But I think some of the unique things that I bring, I'm really experienced in terms of the therapeutic background in the mix, and often that's not part of the picture, or sometimes that's the only part of the picture, and there are none of those sort of systems, processes, structures, ways of thinking. So I'm a bit of a unique blend of a person to turn up in that space. But, you know, I think that we as the church need to do so much better when it comes to responding to people who've experienced hurt and abuse. I think that we've got this real mentality of seeing people as, you know, we talk about the church as family, as whānau. And then when someone leaves the church because they've been hurt, we don't care about them anymore. We just do this thing where somehow we just roll on, and it no longer matters that this person that 5 minutes ago we were calling our brother or sister in this kind of family of faith, it doesn't matter that they're now like down the road and round the corner and you know, in an absolute mess. So I think the church needs to take a lot more responsibility, and that responsibility, I described it to someone the other day in a business sense where they weren't getting what I was talking about. And I was like, it's like this. The church has not paid its taxes. It's been doing all this work, and we've got to go back and right the wrongs of the past, because there's been a cost to how we have done things, the way we have held power, the way in which we have treated people because our goals and mission or in the, you know, functioning of our community have been more important than everyone being okay in the process. And we've got to go back and put those things right. Yeah.
Often when people think of church hurt, the things that come to mind are, you know, the sexual abuse scandals and things like that, which like are horrific and are a part of this discussion. But people who have been hurt by the church is a much broader category than that, isn't it?
Yeah,
like
definitely.
What sorts of hurt do you see in terms of what are the things that have damaged people?
All sorts. Issues around belonging, around them being accepted for who they are, around not being protected or supported. You know, the church should be the safest place for people to find themselves. And the church is meant to be an experience for people of their dignity as a human being, as a child of God. And that is not the standard that we conduct ourselves to. And so sometimes it's about things that were done, and sometimes, a lot of the time, it's about things that weren't done and what people didn't experience in communities of faith, we would say. Yeah.
The Royal Commission Enquiry into abuse in state and faith-based care came out recently, and I talked a couple of episodes ago to Ken Clearwater about that. Firstly, what are your general thoughts on the fact that this inquiry happened and what you know of what's come out?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's amazing, and I think we as the church need to see it as a gift to the church. I am absolutely mortified. Obviously, this is an area of particular interest to me, but over the last few weeks, I've been saying to people, have you read the report? Like, people who 100% I would have expected to have engaged with the report, and they haven't at all. And I'm like, okay, so, homework, just go and read the recommendations, just something, anything. But I think all Christians in Aotearoa, New Zealand, need to engage with this. It's really important that people understand that these were the ministries of the church at the time. And so people look back and they think, oh, this is all historic. We don't have orphanages anymore. This is how it goes. That was then and this is now. But we as the church have ministries today to people in need. And there are risks with those. We know there are still people getting hurt. We know that there is a lag of decades before people come forward and share their stories. And so we have to think about, how do we do ministry as the church today? How do we do relationship and community and power and all of these things in a way that doesn't generate the same hurts of the past?
Yeah. It's interesting you talk about it being, every Christian should engage with this, not just every church. Because I think, some people would say, church leaders need to engage with this. Why every Christian, not just every church leader?
Well, I mean, cynically, can I say that the leaders aren't? Well, the leaders aren't engaging with it particularly well, or they're engaging with it in something of a transactional sense, because some of those people that I'm talking about having crossed paths with over the last few weeks, where I've been like, and so the Royal Commission report, and they haven't read it. That's pretty concerning. I think that one of the things people need to understand about the Commission is that they were charged with obviously hearing people's stories and experiences, but a key thing about a Commission of Enquiry is they are inquiring into why this happened. So what were the causative factors that resulted in this really prevalent, very dark experience of abuse for so many people? And honestly, if you read the Royal Commission report through that lens, the causative factors are around power and how power is held in the church, around racism, around views towards people with disabilities or people who identify as LGBTQI+. There's a whole lot of content in there around women and the church's treatment of women, around the way in which religious leaders are held up as these kind of demigods, and what that does, that creates a culture where abuse and harm happens.
Yeah.
Honestly, Andy, if we hold those things up, can you tell me that they are not still issues in the church?
Yeah.
Like, to me, that's the reason why all Christians need to read the Royal Commission report. Because the conditions, the causative factors that created abuse and harm in the church decades ago are still alive and well in the church in New Zealand today. They have a modern expression. They look different, but they are still exactly the same as what they were. And we have to do something about that. I don't think that God could possibly be happy with his kids going, but we're going to reach the people, and we're going to do the things, but we're going to really, really hurt people along the way. Like, that is not glorifying to God. And, only some people are going to belong in this thing. Only some people are going to belong in this, our version of the kingdom that we're creating in our churches. That is just completely unacceptable to me.
And in some spaces, you almost feel like it's the ends justifies the means.
Absolutely.
And yes, people have been hurt along the way, but look how much good we've done.
And honestly, could church leaders try saying that to God?
Yeah.
Like, what do they think he's going to say about that?
Yeah. I talked to Ken when I chatted with Ken Clearwater. One of his things about what we as individuals can do is, hold people in power to account. And what you're talking about is becoming aware of why we need to do that, becoming aware of what it is that we need to hold them to account for.
Yeah, and we say, the church is the people. Well, hello, that means that you as a person and me as a person have to take responsibility for this issue that we buy into. We're buying tickets to this thing, and whatever church you're a part of, whatever entity you support and buy into and participate in, you are responsible for how power is held in that place. And we all have to take a really good look at that and what is it that we're supporting. An analogy that I use for this is it's a little bit like thinking about coffee and fair trade coffee. We know that the coffee that we purchase we need to think about where that has come from, how that was produced, the true cost of that. And we're all quite educated now about fair trade coffee and the deal being fair for the producers of those coffee beans, often, in other countries. Well, how come we cannot think about fair trade churches? How come we can't think about actually what product are we buying here in the church? And we have moved on as a family from a church where, we could see that we were buying into something that we didn't think was particularly dangerous, but could be. And we actually have to vote with our feet. And we loved being part of that church. It was convenient for us to consume faith in that kind of setting, but it was also unacceptable to us to support a hierarchical, patriarchal structure. And so we actually have to make our own personal and family decisions about where we find belonging in faith, with that kind of fair trade thought in mind.
And that puts the onus on all of us, because we're not going to create better cultures without all of us.
Totally. And yes, you might like the taste of a particular kind of coffee, but honestly, if you know how it's produced and the cost that other people are paying for you to have that delicious coffee, maybe could you have coffee that's a little bit less delicious, or this may be a little, not quite what you would prefer, but is the ethical and conscious choice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Strange analogy, I know. People are like, hang on a minute.
No,
but sometimes you got to do that.
I think it's really good because it does go, okay, once we know, then we need to make some decisions about that.
Yeah.
And again, you're saying, well, let's go and read this report so that we know.
Yeah.
So that we can't say, oh, well, I didn't really know about that. Because I think, a lot of people would be quite surprised at the extent. I don't think there'd be really anyone who's surprised that stuff has happened, but the extent of it, I mean, we're talking thousands and thousands of people.
Yep, 200,000.
Yeah, and not all of them were harmed in the church, but a huge proportion of them were.
And even more were neglected, the Commission's keen to point out.
Yes, yeah, that this is just the ones who have come forward and the ones who were actually abused through intent, and so there's a whole lot more that have been hurt through this, and once we know that, surely that changes how we then move forward with how we do stuff.
Hopefully. And I think the Commission is really direct in saying, the church has breached people's human rights, has not upheld Te Tiriti o Waitangi in terms of ensuring the flourishing of Māori in this place. And we need to think about some of those absolute fundamentals and basics in our own expressions of church. This is we need to make this deeply personal. We can't make this about lawyers and redress processes and reports that get shuffled around from desk to desk and, tracking of outcomes of processes. I believe in a lot of that stuff to some extent, but that is not where the power lies. I love the saying that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And actually, until we transform the cultures of the church, we are always going to have abuse and harm.
As someone who knows more about this than a lot of us and has seen large numbers of people hurt by the church. Why do you stay connected to the church?
Well, fortunately, I have a really deep, profound personal faith. And that has been experienced in a way that's really undeniable for me. And so I'm really certain that my personal faith in God will endure through this, that the nature of that very personal relationship is such that it won't and can't be broken. I have paid a bit of a price, though, in terms of my relationship with church. It's not a great thing to get multiple messages of hate from people, and there has been a lot of pain and difficulty in being someone who stands up for issues, and that definitely has made me go, wow, like some people who hold a Christian faith have got really interesting ways of seeing the world that don't line up with me, but that can't really affect my relationship with God. I'm very careful in terms of what I need to maintain my own relationship with the Lord, how I use things like spiritual direction, how I pray, how I nurture that relationship, and I have a deal with God and with, my friends and family too, that if ever this work impacts my own faith, I will absolutely step away from it, because I know that is far more precious to me, and that's a price that is too high to pay, and that's okay. But I think the fact that I also allow myself that choice is part of what helps me maintain being able to work in this space. Yeah.
It blows my mind that you look at Jesus, and the people he interacted with most were the people that were being hurt by the system.
Yeah.
And the system at the time was being controlled by the religious institution of the day.
Yeah.
And those were the people that he went to.
Yeah.
And Christians are getting upset with you for going to those same people.
Yeah. It's pretty inescapable in reading the Gospels to see the way in which Jesus goes to the margins, goes to the hurt, to the vulnerable, to the powerless. Like, I'm sorry, but are we reading the same book?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I know it wasn't me that sent those messages to you, but, I'm really sorry that you had to receive those hateful messages, because you are doing such a good work of standing up for people and for standing with people. And I just wish people could see that rather than just getting their, their fury on. And, they say there's no hate like Christian love.
Yeah.
And sometimes people have experienced that. And a lot of the people that you've worked with have experienced that.
Yeah.
And it's heartbreaking for me that you have to experience some of that while you're doing that work as well.
Yeah. I hold, though, that the pain that I might endure along the way is nothing compared to, like, I'm not the victim in that scenario, as difficult as it is at times. I think almost one of the things I've cheekily done in my head is decided that it's a key performance indicator of mine to offend the right people.
Yeah.
And that the people...
Well, I guess that's how it worked with Jesus, wasn't it?
Totally. Who's upset with you? That's such a good measure of what you're doing in the world. It's not about pleasing everyone. It's about offending the right people, I've decided. And that is part of me living out my faith, is knowing that if you're actually doing it right, then you are probably turning a whole lot of things upside down. We follow a Jesus who flipped tables in the synagogue. Yeah. And, if we're doing it right, there's going to be some reaction to flipping those tables. And that's okay. It's actually a marker of my faithfulness to the Lord. I don't see that as a game of like success or, I want to go out there and ruffle feathers. That is not my nature at all. But I'm like, actually, sometimes I think it is a marker of the work that we're doing.
What interests me about that too is that, like, I hear some of that sort of argument used from people who are doing the hurting.
Yeah.
Going, oh, well, people are, if you're doing the right thing, people are going to get upset with you. But, they're the person in power hurting the person who's not in power, and often people outside of the church, or that's who they're taught, or the people that they consider outside of the church, which actually is a whole nother conversation.
Absolutely.
But you're saying it about actually, the people that are getting offended are often the people in power, people in Christian leadership roles, and those are the people that Jesus got up the nose of, was the religious powerful. And again, not that you're going out of your way to do that, but it's pretty natural that when you start, poking the bear, they're not going to like it. Tell us about your PhD work that you've gotten into.
Yeah, well, it's still a little bit secret, squirrel. I'm a few months away from being able to tell people what that is around. But I am doing a deep dive into an area within New Zealand society that relates to Christian faith, where there has been a lot of injustice. And so, I think when people hear the topic, they'll be like, of course.
Yeah. And so, again, another expression of the same stuff that we've been talking about the whole way through, of seeing people who are being pushed to the side, being trodden on, and caring.
Yeah, and I think one of the key things in the PhD is exciting for this reason, is that it's actually just giving them their voice. It's not me speaking for them. It's not, in a lot of the work that I'm doing, it's just enabling people who are powerless to have their own voice. And in that, we restore a lot of their mana and their dignity, because this is just me helping people use their own voice, and what an incredible privilege that is.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. I look forward to finding out more about that, and down the track reading some of it.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone ever reads any of my research, but I'd like to think they do. But
well, there'll be a version of it that is hopefully publicly digestible.
Cool. One of the other roles that I didn't mention at the start when I was listing your myriad of things that you do is that now you're also a podcaster as well.
Yes.
You have a podcast, Feel Better.
Yeah.
And you give insight and advice around a lot of the sorts of things that you would offer to people in counselling sessions and things like that. First question is, did you just not have enough to do?
Yeah, I mean, you can talk to Jono about that one. One of the problems is people are like, oh, you really should, you should do video from your podcast. I'm like, guys, I'm like recording at 9:00 at night in my dressing gown.
Yeah, totally.
So, that's the luxury of being a solo podcaster, is that you can snap those times whenever you like. But really for me, again, it's about access and getting people thinking about their mental and emotional health. We live in our own selves. Like, you cannot escape. I've never met anyone who can escape their brain and their feelings. Like, they have a funny way of following us around. And I want people to feel better. I want to cover topics that really make a difference in terms of how people feel. So I have, episodes on emotion regulation, on saying no, on perfectionism, on feelings, on a whole lot of different listener questions that people send in with their dilemmas, on mood, on managing stress and how to cope with a bad day and overwhelm, and like normal sort of everyday topics. It's not about depression and anxiety and the big kind of topics that are out there. It's about all those in between things that influence our day-to-day experience of our lives. And I just think our lives are brief, they are really precious, and we deserve to feel good while we are living our lives on this earth.
Yeah, and I've found so much of it so valuable.
Yeah.
Particularly the questions in and around parenting.
Yeah.
And I love you did some stuff around how can I do emotional regulation while I'm also parenting.
Yeah.
Because I can't just go away and sit by myself and
totally.
It's not possible.
Yeah.
And I feel like that at times, going, oh man, I wish I could. But to have some real practical things to go, well, maybe I could try this, or maybe I could get the kids involved in this thing, or
because chances are they need that emotion regulation at the same time that you do.
Yeah. So
It's a delight to do, and I'm so grateful to have had people support that, and it's been really cool to know that I can be out for a walk with someone in Sydney, and I can be on a plane with someone who's going to Greece, and while someone's doing their groceries or cleaning their house or driving to pick the kids up from somewhere, that I can join them in their life and speak into their life. That is wild. I'm sure you find the same thing.
What sort of feedback have you had from listeners?
Yeah, really, really great. And the incredible thing for me is that I can see, a handful of counselling clients in a day, and then I can come out from my sessions and be like, oh, like 130 people listen to my podcasts today. Like, I can't have that relationship and impact if I continue to work one-to-one. And the scale, we know, of the mental health challenges in our community is such that actually people like me with 20 years of therapeutic experience, we can't just sit in our offices, charge our fees, and expect people to come to us with all of those access barriers. It's really important that I'm responsible with the knowledge that I have and use that to help people. So there's no plan with it. There's no commercial gain out of it. It's a public service for me. That's kind of a space where I can just get back to like the helping gang and do what needs to be done to help people feel better.
Oh, that's awesome. And for me, it's just another example of your heart of just wanting to help people, and a lot of your work you do make money from.
Yeah.
But you're quite obviously not someone who's in it for the money. You're someone who's in it for the good, for the way that your connection with people makes them feel.
Yeah.
For the changed lives, and the way that ultimately people's directions of their lives can change. So, thank you for the conversation today. Thank you for the welcome into your space. Thank you for getting your dog to stop jumping on me.
It's a challenge.
Yeah. But no, thank you for all of these different things that you do and the heart with which you do them. Because to me, I wanted to talk to you for this podcast because over the years I've seen your heart. And I think it's something that's really important for people to hear, that actually, when we've got a heart for something good, we can find different ways of doing that.
Yeah.
And you're a great example of that, of going, actually, this is driving me. Here's another way I can do that.
Yeah.
Thank you for what you're doing to bring a bit of heaven down to earth.
Thanks for having me.
Hello, heaven. Will I hear you whisper to come near?
There was a whole lot in that conversation, just like there's a whole lot in Charlotte's life. But I love that tying all of it together is that sincere desire to make a difference for those in need of help. So Charlotte, thank you for who you are and for what you do. Here is a blessing for you. Charlotte, as you juggle all these various roles and challenges, may your family continue to be your place of stability, fun, and even a little craziness, grounding you in love and life each day. As you invest so much in the relationships of others, may your own relationships flourish too. May you continue to have a community of people around you, people who let you know you are loved when those hate arrows fly your way, who fight with you and for you as you fight with and for others. And may they be people of peace and joy as they journey alongside you. May opportunities come your way, including those that have for a time been closed to you because you stand with the marginalised. And may those opportunities allow you to continue to flourish and be all you can be. May your podcast continue to grow and help people all over the world, bringing insight, hope and empowerment to so many. May the ethos of the Helping Gang forever drive you on, reminding you in the hard times of why you do what you do, and of the joy that it is to give yourself to others. Lastly, may you know you are seen, you are heard, and you are loved. Thanks to Strahan for the music and Rangi for the karakia. Join me next time when I talk to Asif Mal. Asif was born and raised in a Christian family in Pakistan and, now living in the UK, has gone on not only to support Christians who experience persecution around the world, but to actively work towards harm prevention for them, lobbying government officials and others with power to step in and create change. He has literally saved hundreds of lives through the work that he does through an organisation that he founded. It's an amazing story. I hope you'll join me. Until then, me inoi tātou.
E tō mātou matua I te rangi, kia tapu tō ingoa, kia tau mai tō rangatiratanga, kia mea te tau e pai ai ki runga ki te whenua, kia rite anō ki tō te rangi. Homai kia mātou ai nei, he taro mā mātou mō tēnei rā. Muro mātou hara, me mātou hoki e muru nei I o te hunga, e hara ana kia mātou. Aua hoki mātou e kawea, kia whakawaia, engari whakaorangi a mātou I te kino. Amen.